Welcome, everyone, to the Workforce Navigator podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have on a very special guest from Eastridge. We have on Jessica Zucker. You are the Senior Vice President of Industrial and Strategic Staffing, covering the entire U.S. You used to work for the world's largest global staffing firm, and you chose to come here. And I want to understand a little bit more why. But before we get into that, because basically we're going to talk about the industry's best kept secret, and that's Eastridge. And so I want to uncover that and pull that apart a little bit. But before we do that, would you mind just explaining a little bit more about your background before we get started?
Absolutely, Steve. I'm super excited to be here. I started in staffing, well over 15 years ago. And it's not a career I had anticipated embarking on, but I went to a temporary staffing company to help me get an opportunity, ended up flipping on the other side of the desk and became an internal team member, and really found a passion in not only helping people find work, but ultimately helping customers solve for business challenges when it comes to staffing and workforce contingent planning. So I had focused on primarily manufacturing logistics, also did work a little bit on the administrative professional side, but again, was really excited to stay in the industry and help customers, was able to grow my career. At some point, had over 25 different offices and working with over 100 different team members. And I think one of the most rewarding aspects about it was not only helping over 500 customers, but ultimately being able to help promote 20% of my team to be able to get to the next level. So it's been an exciting and very rewarding career, and I was excited to take my career to the next level here at Eastridge.
Well, good. And I love how you focus on your team. And we all know that high performance teams equate to high performance companies. And we've actually even had on this podcast PhDs that have talked about in their thesis how they proved that engaged employees create high performance teams that create highly engaged clients that create growth. So that's what we're going to talk about. I want to ask first off, just as if we were just having a cup of coffee here, tell me a little bit about the brand Eastridge and what makes Eastridge different.
Yeah, I think that is such a big question. And ultimately, that is what drew me into Eastridge was the brand. I was fortunate enough to have gotten to know the CEO or the former CEO, Stein. And I think what really stood out to me was just his servant leadership and how he genuinely appreciated his team and what he would do for them and the vision that he would lead with. And I found that extremely inspiring, so much so that I asked him to become my mentor in the industry. And 3 years later would have it, I'd be working with him. So I think so much of Eastridge's brand, when you think about the impact to the customers that we have and the delivery, the solutions we bring, the opportunities we create for our talent and our associates, that's all great. But what's really cool is to work inside a company that really truly cares about the people that works with Eastridge and being able to come together and come up with solutions to not only help just our customers, but our communities as well. So I think going back to your question, I certainly believe that culture is a huge part of our brand here at Eastridge, and it's something that is demonstrated with each and every person on our team.
It's interesting because on this podcast, I've interviewed people at all level of organizations, and there's not one that these days doesn't say, I'm interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing me. In the culture, in the fit, and do I feel comfortable working there? And that was one of the very first things that attracted you to Eastridge. What that all tells me is how important the culture is inside an organization and how it attracts and then retains. So tell me a little bit about how you parlay that into how you work with your clients and understanding their culture and assessing candidates based on fit for that culture.
Yeah, I would say culture is extremely important. Certainly looking for what the customer is solving for, but then how do we identify the person with the right skill sets? And then also the aptitude or the ability to match the culture that they have, the environment. One of the ways in which we've done that very successfully is leveraging our GATE program, the Gateway to Attaining Technical Experience. And what this does is this allows us to open up the candidate pool and truly find candidates that maybe have not had exposure or experience in those particular industries. And it allows us to look at their competencies, their actual real skill sets, not what's just written on a resume, and be able to assess that and then be able to make the right match. Also, I think it's really important to consider our recruiters or our recruitment partners. They have what I like to call this intuition that sure, technology, AI, that can all help with keyword matching, but there's just the sense and ability to read a person, to understand and anticipate, is this person going to be comfortable under pressure? Does this person demonstrate reliability? And so I think really deeply leaning into that, what I have always called is like that recruiter intuition to make the right match. You don't want to put an individual that is maybe very detail oriented, quality focused into a very fast paced environment and vice versa. So I think it's very, very important and critical that we not only just look at skill sets or the keywords of a position, but really truly aligning what is this business goals and then what are the attributes that they need in a candidate that would succeed in their organization.
And I know that the GATE program, I love that you brought that up because there's skill gaps in every industry at every level. Finding really good people just isn't easy, but in manufacturing and in light industrial, it's even worse. Explain a little bit more about how the GATE program finds or how do you grow the pool of candidates good for that position?
It is so funny to me because so many organizations will tell you like their recipe of the perfect candidate and their job description. They need to have 2 years of assembly experience. They need to have soldering experience, worked under microscopes. And then they want you to forward a resume so they can scan it. And they want to do all the work when they pay us to do that. But in reality, what they're hiring us to do is to build a candidate pool and to really identify the key characteristics of a successful human being that would work well in their organization. So, what the GATE program allows us to do is assess individuals regardless of their experience. For example, and I will tell you, I was a very bad test subject and I would not do well at most of our clients. But for example, there's a manual dexterity test that I failed on. And it really assesses like the fine motor skills that are so important and critical to many organizations. In fact, I've had meetings with several clients that say, I've automated this, I've got a robot for that. But there are certain delicate parts that only a human can be able to either get to or to manipulate or to handle. And that's why it's really important to assess manual dexterity. And by us leveraging this GATE program, we are going beyond those that just have experience on their resume or that could be found on Indeed. We are really going deep and wide into the communities to understand what skill sets do you have and how can we best match those to create a new career for you.
I don't have to have worked on an assembly line to have good manual dexterity.
Correct.
So the industry is looking at experience within the industry as that's the total talent pool. And you're saying, no, you might have been a manager at McDonald's and you might have incredible dexterity. So that makes a lot of sense. As we're talking about like being on the line, I know that you pride yourself on that you will visit your sites. You'll know exactly, you'll go onto the line, you'll understand the shift dynamics. Tell me a little bit about what you do that you think goes above and beyond the normal staffing and recruiting company to really learn about your clients?
Yeah. I would say, hands down, the partnership that our teams have with our clients is incredible. And in some scenarios, we are on site working side by side with either HR or their production. In other cases, we've got weekly check ins, meetings that we're going there. We're not only meeting with the client, but we're meeting with the associates. So I would say it starts with our partnership and making sure that we're on the same page. And again, we're helping them really see the value in partnering with the organization like Eastridge, that we're really helping them bring down their turnover, or maybe it's their overtime, whatever is their specific goals. So I would say it starts with partnership and communication is number one. The other thing I would say is we're not afraid to be consultative. And sometimes that's hard. Naturally, if you're a people pleaser and the customer tells you I want XYZ, you want to go try to find that. but that's not always in their best interest. And so we have analytics and data and also use cases that show or highlight where things have not worked so well. So it's not uncommon for us to talk internally about what a customer is asking for, be able to go to our data and our experiences and come back and present something differently to that client to say, here is where you're getting stuck. Here's where we recommend that you open it up. Here's how we can help partner with you to create a solution and ultimately help them achieve their business goals. I would say that. And then certainly like getting an in-depth understanding of the positions, of the environment, making sure we understand each supervisor's preference. It can vary. They could be on the same manufacturing floor and one supervisor likes this and another one likes that. So really ensuring that we've got good intakes and not just sitting there reviewing through a job description. That is what differentiates us from AI. AI can help leverage and bring in candidate traffic. It can help us screen out candidates. But for us to really have that true human connection with our customers and with our talent, that's what's going to make the difference.
Sounds like the antithesis of what the industry is known for, which is quantity. Look how many resumes I was able to give you for that position. Tell me a little bit about your philosophy on quantity versus quality.
So I like the best of both worlds. Like you need some level of activity and quantity to get to the quantity and allows you to be selective. For example, we do have expectations around how many people we need to meet with in terms of candidates each week. Now, what that does is that does allow us to be more selective. So that person that we met with that we were on the fence about, we don't have to go with that person to fulfill this opportunity. Rather, we can be more selective. So on average, we are probably starting less than 30% of the associates we meet. And we're able to be very selective about who's going to go where and how we're going to help those clients.
Such a different selective in such a skill gap starved industry. Tell me a little bit about when you have working relationships with your clients and you're working with them on a regular basis, what kind of feedback are you getting? This has got to be very different than what they're experiencing from other staffing partners that they worked with. Tell me a little bit about what you're hearing.
Yeah, it's funny. My first 3 months at Eastridge, one of my goals was to go and meet with our larger customers and partners and really assess and understand not only like how do they feel about us, Eastridge, as a staffing partner, but how do they feel about the industry in general? Where is it going? And I was so impressed with the feedback that I received about our team. And the themes that came up was around communication, partnership, quality, positive impact on their bottom line when it came to reducing turnover, increasing productivity. It's a great experience because oftentimes as a leader, you are a point of escalation. So you're de-escalating and trying to mend relationships. But what I found is that our team at Eastridge does an incredibly great job at really managing the customer's expectations, going above and beyond. And again, just I keep saying it, building that partnership.
Lots of times there's a big difference between partnership on one end of the scale, vendor on the other end of the scale. And in your title that I introduce you with is strategic strategy. Tell me a little bit about that. When you talk about consulting and this partnership, let's unpack that a little bit. What does that mean at Eastridge?
So there's probably a few different ways to look at that. What I would say is we've got a strategic division that specializes in building on-sites for customers and then also entering into new markets. So I think you said at the beginning, we are the staffing industry's best kept secret. And a part of what we're trying to accomplish is scaling and helping more customers in the US. So a part of that initiative is leveraging our strategic team to be able to quickly deploy, be agile enough to build contingent workforce in pretty much anywhere in the US, especially around volume. An example of that actually is I just met last week with a really great partner of ours, and they're going through a quarterly business review. And just quarter over quarter, we had grown their headcount by, I think it was just under 40%. What was really cool about this, though, was that our turnover actually decreased and we saw less safety incidents occur. So not only were we positively increasing their headcount, but we were actually reducing that churn. And again, safety was a huge priority of theirs, and we were able to help reduce that as well.
Tell me another story. That was great. I know that you go in and, like, from a strategic point of view, you'll look down to the shift level and if there are issues and what's going on there. Like, how deep does the strategy partnership level go?
Another aspect of our strategic team is our key account managers. And they're like the analytical ones. They're not the salespeople that we put in front of the customers. They are the thinkers. And they come into the partnership with our larger customers. Their job is to really assess how our partnership is going against the customer's business priorities or goals. And from there, what they'll do is identify, like, where are we potentially seeing candidates fall out? Maybe what are some reasons and causes for turnover? And so we'll provide that data to the clients. But in addition, we'll come prepared with some solutions. And again, 50 years in the business, working with reputable companies, we've got a lot of great case studies. We're then able to share that with them. And so our key account managers have done a really good job to be able to help articulate, okay, here's the gap, here's some recommendations, here's where we've seen it work at other organizations. And the funny thing is, it sounds easier than it really is, because it's not usually like we sit down, we have the conversation, and boom, we fix it. It's sometimes sharing that information a couple of times with the customer, coming together, brainstorming a few different ways we can solve for it. And then at the end of the day, we do, and we see a huge impact, not only on our side, but for the customer as well.
Everything you're talking about here is value is a very nebulous term. Everything you've been talking about here, above and beyond the traditional role of a staffing partner, like following that candidate into the company and ensuring that you're learning after the placement. And that's a big part of, I understand, your strategic team is working afterwards. How is this actually being implemented? And the name of your company is Eastridge Workforce Solutions. So that implies much more than just recruitment. Like, how would you define that? Like, how do you define workforce solutions?
It's funny because I think at the beginning of this, we talked a little bit about culture. I tend to do skip levels with my team so that I could talk to every team member and hear how they're feeling, what other recommendations they have. One of the pieces of feedback they kept telling me is, I want a different job title. I feel like I'm more than a recruiter. And the reason for that is because they are oftentimes partnering with clients. They are advising clients to change pay rates. They're advising clients to change the hiring process. They are in. So from their perspective, recruiter didn't quite sit well with them and the value that they were creating for our organization and the organizations they work with. And what we decided to do is to change their job titles to reflect the value that they bring. And so now they are workforce talent solutions recruitment partners, talent solution recruitment managers, so that we can truly articulate the value that they bring to not just the associates they meet with that they're recruiting, but actually the work that they're doing with our clients and how they're consulting them along the process.
Tell me, is that an important part of the best kept secret? I mean, you worked for the biggest, globally, the biggest recruitment company. Do a comparison in your mind. Don't name names or anything, but what are the things that you would highlight? You'd say, okay, this is how the global leader does it. Here's how we do it. What are some of the highlights? What are the key differences there?
With a large global organization, you're going to have a process, you're going to have a recipe, and those things are going to work at scale. What I think is really unique about Eastridge is we have a foundation, we have a strategy, but we're also empowered to do what's best for all stakeholders, meaning for our customers, for our associates, internally. And so an example of changing our internal job titles to adequately reflect not only the type of work, but the value of work that our team members are doing is just one example of empowerment and what we're able to accomplish as an organization like Eastridge. Also being able to come up with an action plan specific to a customer. Let's just say, for example, right now we're talking to an organization that might need 60 call center reps. And we've got different team members internally that could all help facilitate and help this organization be successful. So we come together and it's not black or white, but we can really figure out like what elements of what all of our divisions offer would be a best fit for this customer. So again, it's very customer centric.
There's not a company out there that doesn't say, we're not customer focused. No, we're not customer obsessed, but it's in the execution. It has to be embodied in the very culture of the company itself. And there's a term that's been thrown around when we talk about culture on the podcast by CHROs, chief people officers, VP, recruitment, HR. And it's a culture that creates the psychological safety to make those autonomous decisions. And you just talked about how you're empowered. Like, how important is it on your team throughout the company? Is there psychological safety to do the right thing for the customer?
Yeah, I think that begins with the trust that you build with your teams. I also believe we're human. We're going to make mistakes. I've made a ton of mistakes. And we don't want to make people feel ashamed for making those mistakes. Rather, I would encourage honesty and integrity. And they come forth and say, here's what happened. And then one of our Eastridge DNA attributes is self-awareness and ownership. So being able to reinforce those behaviors. If I have a team member that does something that maybe wasn't the best decision, we talk through it and we talk about what is within our control, what can we change, and what did we learn and what can we do differently. And I think that is really important when you're working with an organization, especially that wants to grow. There has to be room for experimentation, and you're going to be afraid to fail if you're not allowed to make those mistakes, or if you just have to go exactly by the book. And I truly believe that probably started with the founders of Eastridge and it transcended to Suckstein, the former CEO, and now Rodrigo. I think that they all have done a great job to invite a difference of thought and really understanding what's going on. And again, learning from the mistakes that we make and moving on and applying that knowledge to something better. In the same thought, or in the same vein, I also think it's important to question success. So when we're successful, what is it that we did that caused us to be successful? It's not just luck. There was intentional thought, activity, execution that went into that. So what can we pause and learn from that so that we can be able to replicate that again? Or who else can we share this within our organization?
I want to ask you a non-traditional question. And it's all around because we've come full circle about the importance of the culture. And I just want to ask you this question. It's how it makes you feel when I ask you this question. If I were to take the existing culture away from Eastridge that you have, the reason why you came, the reason why there's the psychological safety, the empowerment, the success you're having, if I were just to take that culture away and just replace it with the normal everyday business culture, what does that make you feel?
Sad. That would be really sad. The reason I came to Eastridge was the culture. All of the basics were there. Like, it's incredible to see the work that they did for the clients. Like, I'd see the case studies on LinkedIn and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I got to know the CEO. I had the opportunity to connect with different team members that demonstrated ownership at Eastridge. But honestly, the biggest difference was the culture. It really was. So you take that away, I think you take away the secret sauce of Eastridge.
You've got a slogan that's let's get to work. What does that mean to you? And how does that play into everything we've been talking about here?
It's so funny. Our leadership group had come together and we were working through different quarterly initiatives and things that we're thinking about in terms of how do we elevate the industry standard? What are ways that we can ensure that we are leading the industry, but then also have the highest quality standards, expertise, all of that. And we kept going through things and we're all biased to action. And at one point, I think it was James, our CMO, was let's just get to work. Let's do this. And we all chuckled and we kept saying it and it became a thing. And it's so true because at Eastridge, again, most individuals really demonstrate a lot of ownership. And so we'll talk through something, we're thoughtful, but then it's like, okay, let's get to work. So whether it's meeting with a customer and we're talking through their plan to fill 60 positions, which by the way, one of my teams did last week, they're able to fill 60 positions in 1 week because a customer needed help for a couple of weeks. And they were able to do it. And so it's just like our team comes together, says, let's get to work. Here's our plan. Let's go. Whether it's that or whether it's us sitting down with the client and working through a direct hire opportunity that is super important and integral to their organization, let's get to work. So it's just become our tagline. I think it's very action oriented and it pushes us in the right direction.
I've asked so many questions here, but what haven't I asked that's important to tell about the brand story? What Eastridge does? What creates that secret sauce?
I would say about Eastridge is we've been around for over 50 years. It's a sustainable company that has partnered with some great, incredible partners. What I think is really cool is where we're going in the future in our industry and how we're helping solve for the future, and not just to Eastridge's benefit. A lot of people have talked about the skill shortage and what is anticipated to happen by 2030 and half the positions go unfilled. And Eastridge, we're really looking at how do we help with that? Because that has a huge impact. I'm not talking about just on anybody's P&L, but if you don't have people to help build ships, then you're not going to be able to get the newest iPhone. Or if you don't have somebody that is able to build something that is going to go into your vehicle, you're going to have a vehicle that's not going to be able to drive and you're not going to be able to go to work. So there's just like this reciprocal action that happens. And so I really appreciate Eastridge's vision and focus around not just solving for our customers' challenges today, but how do we solve for the future?
Our human brains can only remember about two or three things at a time. And so if there was one thing, because we've talked about so much here, that you wanted people to take away about Eastridge, what's the most important takeaway you want them to have?
It's a good question. I can't say it in one thing, but what I will say is organizations are successful when you have a team that's fully engaged. It's our seeking systems are activated and we are naturally more driven to success. Eastridge starts internally with that and builds that culture. And that culture then transcends to wanting to perform and do a great job for our customers, to wanting to go above and beyond and help our associates that we partner with. So I guess in essence, it would be the level of engagement and culture that we have at Eastridge that truly impacts everything that we do.
Here's what I know, Jessica. People are going to have questions. Is it appropriate that we give out a link to your LinkedIn profile that if people had questions, they could reach out?
Absolutely. I stay in contact with so many people in the staffing industry, within HR, manufacturing, distribution leaders. I constantly wanting to learn about different trends and then share insights as to what's working with other organizations. So I'd be happy to contribute that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming onto the podcast today and sharing and really painting a very colorful picture of what it's like to not only work at Eastridge, but it's like what it's like to work with Eastridge. I just appreciate your time today. Thank you.